Good afternoon, everybody. I noticed it thinned out after General Gabriel left, so we'll try and make it interesting here. He says he's going to hang around and ask hard questions. This afternoon, I've have the honor of chairing the industry panel, doing things a little bit different this year. I asked 6 of our industry leaders to come join us, and we want to talk a little bit about what it's like operating in this kind of constrained environment. Here we are, we're approaching halfway through, or beyond halfway through our fiscal year, and approaching halfway through our calendar year, and we don't have a budget. The contracts awarding, all the challenges each of these companies have in trying to maintain their readiness as they help the Army maintain their readiness. So what I did is I asked a group of an OEM, a major OEM, I asked a major OEM supplier, I asked a power plant, I asked an MRO provider, I asked an engineering company, and I asked a training sustainment company to join us to offer you a better perspective of across the board instead of just getting the big 5 every time, which Kim's one of the big 5, so thanks, Kim. But having them here to think and offer you a perspective from a different level. So today, let me just briefly introduce each one of them. First, I'll start with Kim Smith on the end here. Kim is the Boeing Vice President for Attack Helicopter Programs. Thanks for joining us today. Beth Whitaker. Beth is the CEO and President of Strategy Solutions, which is a small engineering company, woman-owned, Native American, small business, again, to offer that engineering aspect from a smaller business. My old battle buddy, Jim Rogers, who's from here from Lockheed Martin, and Vice President of Army and Special Operations Forces Programs and Government Affairs. Jim, thanks for being here. Scott Rauer, most of you know him as well from being around PU Aviation for a while. Now the Vice President and General Manager of Aviation Operations and Lifecycle Management for DynCorp International. Scott, thanks for joining us. Craig Madden, President of Advanced Turbine Engine Company, ATEC. Most of you know that he's a joint venture between Honeywell and Pratt & Whitney working the ITEP program. So Craig, thanks for being with us. And last but not least, one of my old Pentagon battle buddies, Mike Moody, a Senior Vice President, Training and Simulation Support, System Studies and Simulation, S3. So Mike, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
So what we'd like to do is rather than trying to go through and say what we all do, I think most of you have a pretty good idea of what these companies do and what they offer. So what we thought we'd do, we generated some questions internally that I have, but we also offer you the opportunity to ask any questions. This is supposed to be a Q&A and interactive. We didn't want it to be death by PowerPoint and presentations. We want to respond to your thoughts and questions. So we're going to go through and ask. I've got some questions. If y'all don't get up and ask questions, I'll ask them my questions. And my questions are harder than your questions probably will be. So, and if you ask a good question, you'll get a reward. I won't tell you what that is, but you'll get a reward. So let's start out, Kim. You're first in the barrel. Last month, the Army announced a multi-year contract award to Boeing for 244 aircraft with options for an estimated program savings of over $330 million, the value of a multi-year. How did you work with your suppliers to garner their support for that kind of commitment? And how are you supporting the international industrial participation requirements associated with that? I'm getting harder. And then lastly, what are your biggest challenges and risks in maintaining that supplier base in this constrained, topsy-turvy kind of fiscal environment?
Thank you. Okay, there's a few questions in that, and I'll do my best to address them. But first of all, thanks for starting with the multi-year. We're obviously thrilled that we have our first Apache Echo model multi-year, and it was years in the making, of course, and I see some supplier teammates that were out here that were a huge part of it. It goes without saying, obviously, we have a deep understanding of our costs, and one of the requirements for a multi-year was that we were going to be able to demonstrate substantial savings. Obviously, when you have known quantities, stability across 5 years, that gives you and your supplier teammates some levers that you can pull to drive productivity and harvest those cost savings. So we were able to look deep within our own labor pool to see what we could do to drive out costs, and we were able to make investments in things like tooling, processes, capital, et cetera, that we could spread across that 5 years and frankly beyond to make sure we could get those savings. Interesting thing is, I mentioned it was our first multi-year. We've produced over 300 Echo models prior to this multi-year. I mean, you're pretty far in your program of record and production system before you're on a multi-year. So we had already come down quite a learning curve, which put a bigger challenge on us to really work this. And then, of course, working with our supplier teammates. So we procure 60% of our material for the Apache, for the Boeing work. And we really worked with them. We brought them in early, shared our strategy, goals, and objectives, listened to their suggestions, ideas, things that they could do or that we could help with that would enable them to be more competitive with their pricing to us. We created an unprecedented amount of competition within our supply base, incumbents and those outside as well. One of the challenges is, so we are going to transition a significant amount of work as a result of that competition to ensure best value to our Army customer, our international customers, and of course we're going to do that seamlessly with good quality and schedule. So that's going to be one of our obvious challenges going forward. Industrial participation, international collaboration has been critical to the Apache program from the A model days, as you know. And so whether it's ally-to-ally relationships or us tapping into talent and low-cost sourcing solutions around the globe, our international customers certainly expect that we'll support them with industrial participation agreements, but we do those only when they're mutually beneficial. So a win for them, a win for us. And at Boeing and across our portfolio, and particularly with this platform, our business model arrangements, when we have a win abroad, it's a bigger win at home. So it's really a win-win. So those are a few thoughts on some of your questions. Hopefully I addressed them.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, I don't see anybody jumping up. I'm going to give the next one to my battle buddy, Jim Rogers here. Jim, we talk a lot about, let me put my glasses on. We talk a lot about budget constraints, but tell us about this, how this impacted your R&D investments. That's critical in this kind of environment to garner and maintain those investments in your company in order to keep pace with the new technologies, but also meet the needs of DoD in this kind of topsy-turvy environment.
That's a great question. I got to tell you that as you look at across now, even today, as we look and see what's going to happen today and whether Congress is going to either do a CR or going to pass a bill, or it affects our ability. It affects the Army's ability probably more than ours as in industry. But we kind of stay true to the chief's guidance, which is readiness is first, and we got to make sure that we support the readiness for all of our systems. But we also have got to project forward and support them in a lot of those capability gaps that they've defined and that we are having to put money toward. There's always a lot of controversy of how much IR&D you put down. And so to give you a perspective, last year we spent around $988 million in 2016 on IRAD. The 2015 was around $782 million. So we've pulsed it up a lot in order to make sure that we're ready for this next leap that's coming, because it's coming. I mean, we cannot stay stagnant. If you listen to the news, we have got to bring the technology forward and be ahead of all of our adversaries out there, and we are not there yet. And so we're spending a lot of money on what we call the big wins, the big bets of technologies that have been identified by the services that we are supporting, and then that we're trying to partner with, quite honestly, to save some of our money and their money to work together to get the best products out there in the future.
I'm back. That's great. As Jim's indicating here, you look to the future and you look at the national planning guidance, and you have to kind of translate those warfighting requirements to system and hardware requirements, and then convince your leadership to support those kinds of things. Now, the amount of R&D you put in, I'm sure Beth would love just to have that kind of much to run her company. Beth's here representing strategy. Beth, you're next up. Why in this kind of environment is rapid response important if we're not in an all-out war?
I think that even though we're not in a wartime now, it's still very important to have rapid response for our warfighter. I don't know if any of you were at the general session this morning, but they recognized and they honored the three soldiers that passed away, and that just kind of really touched me because we want to provide that warfighter the best capability that we can, and rapid response is huge. So I know that a lot of times when you have rapid response, it does save money, and we want to always be able to provide the best capability at the best value. So as an engineering company, our engineers and the skill sets we have, they thrive in that environment. For the last 10 years since strategy has been established, our engineers have they expedited the executions with the requirements that are met to meet the mission. And I just think that even though we're not in a wartime, those threats are still out there. So we have to always continue to keep the warfighter in mind. So as an engineering company, we always want to meet those requirements in those executions.
Thank you. Beth, as I said, runs a small company, but they work very closely with the prototype integration facility, being very responsive. So a small engineering company where Jim's got so much more resources in his company, she's got a smaller set, but they're able to be adaptable and respond a little faster sometimes than the big guys can. Okay, anybody else? Nobody's popping up. Craig, you're up next, brother.
Okay.
What strengths has the Advanced Turbine Engine Company joint venture brought to Army Aviation and being responsive to their needs?
Thanks, Tim. I think Tim mentioned that ATEC, Advanced Turbine Engine Company, is a 50-50 joint venture between Pratt & Whitney and Honeywell. So we brought the great capabilities of both companies, combined it into one, where Honeywell makes the engine for the T-55, the Chinook, makes the AGT 1500 engine for the M1 Abrams, made the T-800 engine for Comanche. So we've got a strong Army background, where Pratt did the most recent engine development programs, F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, and then the Raptor. Combine those two companies together and you can make a great engine. So we like to say two is better than one. So it's a good benefit for the DoD to have a joint venture do a program like this.
Thanks, sir. Well, Scott, you're up next, dude. Nobody's jumping up. You got a question? Okay. What issues does industry face in responsibly supporting Army aviation in an austere combat environment?
First of all, thanks for remembering the service provider here. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a difficult environment, obviously, the challenged environments that we're in. I'll take the question from a much more broad perspective. Most of my employees are overseas, so there's some very obvious challenges. Country by country, there are business licenses, taxation structures, labor laws, heck, what currency you're going to pay folks in, and it varies from country to country. Do you have a status of forces agreement in place or do you not? So that's the very top level. So there's a financial risk that is associated with that. Then as you start to get more specific and you look at the actual combat theater, you now ask yourself, am I as a company prepared for physical risk that could be associated with serving in that site? So we're proud to serve alongside soldiers at all times, but the other piece that you need to be prepared with is are you intentionally architectured as a company to handle the worst case scenarios? And it has to be something you don't react to that, you prepare for that and hope you don't need to actually use it. So there are some there's some obvious problems. Again, if you are architected for that, it's achievable.
Thanks, Scott. You're up, sir.
Hello, thank you for taking the questions and thank you for participating. My name is John Stow. I work for a company called JH&A and I'm a software architect working Future Vertical Lift. I'm interested in the way that industry is going to respond to the direction that we're headed, given that capability reuse is high, especially if we look at software reuse on existing computing platforms is a great way to save weight and power as well as to introduce new capability because software doesn't weigh anything. But given also that you have the potential for government architectures like Colonel Jackson mentioned in an earlier session like 60 Victor and the BAT, and as we look at NDAA language for modular open systems, this has the strong potential for changing the marketplace for industry associated with how you do integration, how you compete software development to many of the smaller companies that wouldn't win a large contract, and how the government might specify one common software or even hardware reuse capability across many different platforms and OEMs. And so the question is, how does that change the procurement of individual capabilities reused across all of the aviation fleet from an industry perspective? Thank you.
Great question, especially in this environment of trying to be responsive. You just say software doesn't weigh anything, but it sure costs a lot. I mean, just for what Mr. Langout sitting up here deals with every day with the airworthiness standardization through his RDEC responsibilities, very, very difficult challenge as you look forward. I'm going to flick that question mainly to Kim, because Kim is one that has had to wrestle with that specifically with the Apache here in recent times, and is already looking at the next variant, or I say next variant, and the next software update, and how she manages bringing in those capabilities from different OEMs. So you want to jump on that hand grenade?
Yeah, I mean, so we're down that journey a bit. If you look at how the Echo model or the Apache has evolved, particularly the D to the E, and the advancements we made with open systems architecture and agile development, and we're a systems integrator on the platform, obviously, to begin with. So we have a design and integration role where we do have key partners or subcontractors, or the government has a role in doing part of that architecture development as well. So I guess just a few thoughts. One is I really resonate with what you're saying as far as where further modularity is going. So we've got some foundational, as I mentioned, modularity, open systems architecture. I certainly have a bias in the value that overall systems integrators play to make sure you do things very smartly. If you do it right, it gives you better flexibility, throughout the life cycle. Let's see, obviously you've got to make sure you protect the system as far as advanced protection systems and cybersecurity threats and those things. So, we've got to balance that out as the technology evolves. And future vertical lift, we've got modernization plans to bridge to future vertical lift, specifically to attack capabilities. Software is a big piece of it, and obviously it'll be a big piece of future vertical lift going forward too. But I think wrestling with kind of those trades and the good tension, some of which you articulated in the way you phrased your question, is super important. So.
Yeah, I obviously totally agree. It's a challenge, and this face open architecture as we go forward, it's a challenging business case that we have to work. And what we're finding, and we're also having to work with a lot of the smaller companies that have those niches that can plug and play already, so that they can be an integral part. But just realize, as the next generation jumps, that plug and play goes away and the next plug and play comes in. And so it's a big challenge because you have got to stay completely open, which is what we want. You have this face architecture, so it's interchangeable. But for the government, they now have the capability, or will have the capability on future vertical lift, to say, you know what? I don't really like that screen. I'm going to go with this one now. And literally pull it out and plug another one in, and off you go. And the infamous apps, that sounds very easy on an aviation with AED, the airworthiness piece of that. It's very easy to say, I'm going to plug and play, and I'm going to just put an app on my screen. The challenge with that argument is, especially if they're separate from the flight systems, is that some things do play a part in your flight system, even if it's not literally flying the aircraft. And so you have to take all those into account. So there's a lot of people wishing away a lot of the challenges at the airworthiness piece and saying, I don't need to worry about that. I just need to plug it into my separate mission system and it will work fine. But if you're hooking something on the aircraft and the pilot has got to do something with it, that burden, that human factors burden, has got to be integrated into that whole system. So it's a bigger problem than everyone, I think, thinks it is. And so we're going to have to work through that. And I don't think they've solved the business case for open architecture yet, to be honest.
That's a great response. And I'd like to pile on a little bit. The guys that used to work for me know that I'm very bad at grossly oversimplifying things. But if all of our platforms were all at the same level, this would be real easy. But we're all starting off not in the same place. And each of the OEMs that have developed have done it based on an architecture. So the way I equate it to is we're kind of trying to change the motor while we're driving down the highway and implementing those things. And the short answer sometimes directly conflicts with the long-term vision. And that's where it gets Jeff real spun up, is we'll do something and we'll get it qualified through AED, but it's not a buildable architecture. You just check the block for your one itch. But then when you make the change to that, because you didn't partition it correctly, you got to go back and start over. So I think as we think our way through that, just as Jim is talking about, you got to start at that foundation and make sure it's a building block approach to be able to afford it and to manage it effectively for the warfighter. So that's my 2 cents worth, and you get a candy bar. Okay, next question. Hold on, let me get Mike hadn't had one. I don't want to, he'll start snoring if I don't get him one. And then you're up next.
I'm last twice. That's twice.
Both government and industry frequently talk about improved communications. What are some positive examples of government communications that facilitate industry responsiveness?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having a company like ours up here. We're a services company. Do both see to truly support the program management offices and training services. So a little bit different domain in the entire aviation community than folks to my left and right. But communications to us, especially of a company of our size, we have to be able to respond to a very broad number of opportunities. And like many of you out there, I go to the industry days, and I go to Rock Island Arsenal, and I go to PE Austere. And I will tell you, a great example of pushing information, especially for services contracts, what I've found is PE Austere and what they do in their pulse. Their once a month gathering of the contracting officials and the leaders of the ACC Orlando, their thesis process, and then of course ITSEC. But that as we've began to expand our presence in Orlando, that's been very, very helpful. I even noticed that at Rock Island Arsenal, a 3-day industry day, and then the contract specialists, contract officers coming out and really mingling with many other vendors there. So it was very informal, but very, very helpful for industry, especially in the services business, where it's, there's a lot of task order based, quick turnaround things, and getting a true look at what's coming down the pike is very, very helpful in that regard.
Communications, I think, is clearly the key. And we because of the legal aspects, people get very concerned about answering questions and being open for fear that somebody's going to get info somebody doesn't else. It's hard to do, but in order to be fair for everybody and to get that competition we want, we got to push through and do it. So great, thank you. Sir, you're up. Before you go, though, I noticed that the newest 2-star general in the Army joined us, Bob Marion. Congratulations. Thanks for being here, buddy. Bob, you can't ask any questions. We'll be here till tomorrow morning. Go ahead, sir, please.
For moderating this today for us today. We appreciate it. Thanks to everybody up on the board today. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm with Erickson Incorporated, a Part 135 provider out of Portland, Oregon. We also have a 145 operator in aviation services, primarily folks supporting the warfighter, special operations community in Africa specifically. But one of the questions I have is specifically for my service industry guys that are on the board here, is that in a resource-constrained environment, in a competitive environment that we are faced day in day, how does industry service providers supporting Army aviation provide any real discriminators for the customer, for the warfighter, that is not just a swapping of the badges at the end of the day? So what we're really struggling with in industry is how are we better than the next guy, and how are you guys separating yourselves from the competition in this type of environment?
Well, just before you jump on this hand grenade, Scott, let me read you the question I had written down for Scott. In a resource-constrained, did you get my card?
No, I think I dropped my card.
Oh, okay, that's fine. How do industry service providers supporting Army aviation provide any real discriminating value? Same word. You stole my card. Versus merely going in and flipping badges. And so, Scott, that one was for you, so I'll ask you to jump on it.
So I guess I'm going to let loose of my secret sauce right now, I guess.
That's what you're here for.
Okay. That's a good question. Thanks, Mark. So recognizing Erickson in the space, I'll give my standard pitch on this. The physical act of putting a rivet into sheet metal is a commodity. We know that, repairing aircraft, launching and recovering. Where the magic comes into play, and I'm going to loop back into General Rogers' answer, is having a company that understands the full spectrum of airworthiness and understands the concept of airworthiness. And where that comes is not necessarily just the repair of changing a blade, changing a transmission. It's the management of the maintenance process. So we all know that the airworthiness dictates that the provenance of parts, the method that you use to maintain the aircraft, all must be in compliance with set standards. So it's finding a company that can not only successfully flip badges, which is not a given, but finding the company that wraps it up inside of that process that ensures airworthiness and has done it consistently. We in the service space develop a reputation, just like folks to my left and my right, based upon the service that we provide, similar to how their products are. So it's really finding somebody that understands airworthiness for that service and has built some experience with that, improving it. Hope that answers it.
No, thanks. Do you want to jump on that one, Mike?
I think I'm in the same battle space you're in, and that is as a medium-sized company, and you're either going into a program office or you're providing a service and it's time for recompete. We all know that's a difficult position to be in the incumbent position, because your contract's growing and you're probably more expensive. And that's a challenge. So how do you differentiate your goodness by knowing that program and not come in at a price that prohibits you even being considered? I think it's a very, very, very difficult position, and it promotes badge swap and simply a lower price. Finding that niche, that element, that nugget with a customer that indicates your management is simply a better way and can guarantee a more staffing consistency. That's only one of the ways, but it's a challenge that we struggle with, and companies probably of our size struggle with on a daily basis, and that is how to differentiate yourself in that recompete environment when you're the incumbent. And it's darn hard, and we spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out how we can continue that value to the government. And of course, that leads into the LPTA discussion. And we're very, very happy on this side that it looks like government it seems to be going away from LPTA, because we're happy about that.
If I could add onto that one, let me just dovetail into Mike's comment. We maintain aircraft across Army, Navy, Air Force, Department of State, and I will tell you, as kudos to the Army, the concept of best value for maintenance of our aircraft is alive and well, and they get the return that they have invested in. So the lowest price doesn't always win, but you also achieve readiness rates in combat that are excellent. So we're doing it right over here. I appreciate that in the community, and that's not a guarantee across DoD. It is absolutely not a guarantee.
And I'm supposed to be just a facilitator here, but let me throw in my thoughts as well. Both of these guys are living this day to day. You're living it. But I think the challenge when you talk about LPTA, best value, so much of it is based on who and how they write the RFP. Because quite often we're victims of bad contracting. And you're responding to what you've been asked to respond to. Point one, we got a lot of young, energetic contracting officers that understands what's in DAU. And the challenge that these folks have every day is so much of the passion, the compassion, the performance, the readiness, the service to the soldier is captured in your response. It all boils down to the culture and the reputation that your company has. And the challenge is, how do you take that and put that into words that sparks somebody when it's best value? I mean, we've done it forever. We go cheap and we end up paying for it later. So going to a best value kind where that tries to allow and invigorate and capture that culture of passion, compassion, performance to the soldier is the challenge we all face to go through. I don't have an answer for you, but those are the challenges that we all got to work through together. Okay, anybody next? I'm going into my bag of tricks. Here's your candy bar. Okay. Kim, you're back up. Several key leaders in the Army have indicated that the Apache will be in service until at least the 2060 timeframe. And that seems probable based on the fact that FVL CapeSat 3 has a projected IOC of 2034 based on production rates and that sort of thing. So the Apache is going to be around a long time. And the attack variant out of that comes out after the utility in that scheme. How does Team Apache, which you're leading, plan to keep the aircraft operationally suitable, effective, and maintainable for the next 40 years? And the one word that's not in there is suitable, effective, but I want to add one more, is relevant.
Well, we certainly appreciate that context and what our customers have shared, what the needs are and those timelines for sure. We do have a good history of how we've done iterative innovation, if you will, since the A model days. If you look at how we've evolved the A, the D to the E, and we have a bit of a playbook, and of course it's in concert with PM Apache, TICM for attack, and our major Team Apache partners like the Lockheeds, the GEs, the LBL, Longbow Limited, but also our smaller supply chain partners too. So we work very closely to understand what the capability needs are projected to be and how we look to prioritize that wish list, if you will, to ensure value, not just for the platform, but for the total life cycle. So we keep things in mind around reliability, maintainability, and what have you. And so it's a really collaborative process for sure. We know the total timeline, not just technology maturity, but also things like contracting and the other things that come with government acquisition to make sure we have continuity for our production system as we evolve from one change to the next. We work with our customer to decide what can be federated across ECPs versus what really does culminate into a block point change. We have a modernization roadmap that we have shored up with those visitors to bridge the timeline that you mentioned. ITEP is one of the critical components of that. We're really excited about that and what we think that will be able to do for the aircraft. And we're all in on future vertical lift too, because we know we need to be invested on that too. We've got a partnership with Lockheed, and we've got a solution set for that with the compound coax with the pusher prop that as we continue to hear from our customers, including General McConville today, the importance of keeping the performance to the X, the operation on the X top of mind. So we think that's the best solution for that today. But I'm confident and optimistic that we've got plans that will ensure readiness, relevant, and best value for our customers.
Thank you. And I think she hit on it. It's just so key. She talked about the TICM, the capabilities manager, the requirements generator. You talked about the PM. You talked about the OEM and the subs. But that communication flow back and forth. And I remember living through. I think I saw Shane Openshaw out here earlier when he was the PM, and we lived through this when we were doing manned and unmanned teaming. And the guys in the field were figuring out things faster than we could implement them. But we got it done because of that communication and that flow. And again, that to me is that kind of communication, that openness, that sharing across there is what's going to make us successful to keep these things relevant. So, okay, Jim, I don't want you to get a nap here. Let's wake you back up. Just because I know this is on the tips of everybody's mind, what he must be managing and his entire Lockheed and Sikorsky team are managing. How is the Sikorsky integration proceeding?
Yeah. So just to give you a little heads up, that things are going very well. As we expected, Sikorsky, we've been working with Sikorsky for 40 years. I don't know if you know, on the Navy side, with the Sierra and the Romeos, we do the integration of the aircraft for the Navy. And so we've been partners for 40 years with them. And what's neat about that is that we were very excited when we had the opportunity. It came up, we took it. And we have been working with them, and then their idea of the revolutionary performance, if you look back, evolutionary design, and Lockheed's we're engineering a better tomorrow, are fit hand in hand. I mean, it's actually a great marriage. We have a lot of brothers and sisters in arms on both sides, and we work very well together, not only with the current systems that we have, the older systems that we have to maintain, but also working on the future vertical lift and the options, as well as radar for CapeSat 1. So I can honestly say it's been a great experience. We've learned from them some things that we've changed in Lockheed and vice versa. So it's not one-sided at all. It was a very collaborative effort, and so we've learned from each other and are continuing to grow. So thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, nobody's jumping up. Beth, this one's yours. What are some of the constraints your company has faced in order to meet your customers' needs?
Okay, well, I think we have just a few of those challenges that we've been faced with. One that comes to mind is like downsizing in the government. Like a lot of times, some of our customers, they either retire, they're promoted, or they rotate to other jobs. So then we're faced with the learning curve of someone new coming in, and that affects, project schedules or, other things. Something else that we've been challenged with is contracting timelines. A lot of additional regulations, policies, and procedures that more or less have just inundated the process. So, like with contract awards, we've seen those timelines shift and grow longer and longer. And of course, the program budgets are shrinking daily. So those are just a few of the things that have, challenged us over the years.
Yeah, thank you. The contracting timeline, I mean, nobody is quantifying the cost while programs sit idle waiting to get your contract through. And it's very difficult. I mean, nobody wants to sign up for a bad contract, but somehow we got to get more festive in our support of that. Okay, thanks, Pat. Okay, nobody else is jumping up. Mike, you're up, dude.
Shocking.
Responsiveness is both a government and contractor shared responsibility. What steps would you like the government to take to assist industry in being responsive?
I think some of the last answer is part of that. And in the services business, which is what we're in, starting off with a well thought out and mature draft and final RFPs shortens timelines dramatically. Because we read every word, we read every sentence and every paragraph, and those that come out a little bit less mature end up with hundreds of questions, which delays the process. Secondly, I think an early decision by government on acquisition strategy is this, and what those NAICS are. Is this going to be small business set aside? If it is, let's know it early. If it's full and open, that's early, and don't change it at the last minute, because then you're teaming. You just simply have to start all over again. And we would all like to see all those awards come out on time. I mean, you're in a small business in a highly competitive environment. It's just that time really challenges companies to retain staff and to be ready. And lastly, we have seen some gaps in contracts where services contracts that were not able to get competed and awarded on time, even if it's a month gap, trying to keep employees around to come back is a huge challenge, because they have those obligations at home as well. So all those, but we're always optimistic, and we appreciate everything right now that it appears that government is beginning to do. So we see perhaps a light at the end of the tunnel.
To me, it seems like it boils down to communication, formal, having a good forecast, stability, and funding, and all of that is something that the government. Look at what we're doing right now. We don't even know if we're shutting down tomorrow. So those kind of things, I know we all recognize. Everybody in industry recognizes how that just becomes a tidal wave all the way down to the tier 4 and 5 suppliers. So good, thank you. Nobody's jumping up. My last prepped question, Craig Madden. What is ATEC doing to ensure the improved turbine engine program remains on track in this environment, and that the best engine is fielded to the warfighter in this competitive environment?
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I think the number one thing is we're in the preliminary design phase right now, and that's 24 months. We're about 8 months into it, and it's flawless execution of that preliminary design. Give no one an excuse to go after this program, so we have to do well in preliminary design. Number two, what's really important for this engine is to integrate into the Black Hawk and Apache. So the Army is contracted with Boeing and Sikorsky, and we're working with them every day to make sure we integrate this engine in, and that's so important to us. I'd say three, whenever we're on Capitol Hill, we promote this program. We promote ITEP, not necessarily ATEC or our engine, to keep the program sold. And there's great support up on Capitol Hill. And for example, we were just up a couple weeks ago telling them about the negative impact of the CR. Here's what, if the CR continued and the budget wasn't resolved, here's the impact to the program. And so it's a pretty stark reminder to people on Capitol Hill on the impact. So I think when we can promote the program in Capitol Hill, and it helps the Army keep the program sold.
Good, thank you. If you were in the opening sessions this morning, you heard the Army leadership is staunchly behind ITEP and its development, its progress. But we also heard about the CR and the impact. And when you stop a program because it runs out of money, as all of them have kind of alluded in their answers, you don't just flip a switch back on the next day. And those engineers that have been working, that while you're shut down for 30 days waiting to get your funding back, well, they went over to another job. And now you want them to come back and say, trust me, we're going to keep our funding stable. They got families to take care of. So we've got to keep that funding stable. That's just key. Okay, anybody else? I've done all my canned questions. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? I turn the mic back over to y'all. Any final thoughts from any of y'all? I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I mean, you think about it, most of the military is here and they're trying to get their message out. But when you come here, these folks, they're supposed to be out speed dating. They're doing all their meetings and doing all the things that they do, staying busy, staying frantic, and to take your time to do this. I appreciate y'all being part of this. I only got 4 candy bars left, so who wants a candy bar? Two more, is it?
I'm on it, man. I'm on it.
Okay.
I can't take them home. Folks, thanks for your attention. We'll be glad to stand around and ask any questions if y'all have any.